falling, I'm falling, I'm falling, I'm falling, I'm falling. Shouldn't be trusting me, I could be making it all up, you know. Out of control, you don't know me. I'm a danger to myself.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is that you are tuning in. This is Unapologetically Me, featuring me. No special guest, just me. If you're new here, hi, thank you for tuning in. I just want to let you guys know immediately this is a part 4 of a 4-part series. And before you watch this one, I hope that you have already, and I encourage you to check out parts 1, 2, and 3, and then you'll be right exactly where you need to be for part 4. And we're just going to jump right on into it because you guys have been waiting for this for a long time, and I apologize for not getting it to you sooner. You know, life, right? All right. So moving right in from part 3. Personally, I'm on the fence at this point. I kind of want to sway one way, but I will say I watched the documentary Finding Kendrick, and it got me. But the evidence is what I have to go with. And as far as evidence, there isn't any. But why isn't there any? We don't have the clothing that could have had someone else's DNA on it, blood. If there was a fight, there likely would have been someone else's blood. Now, Kendrick had those cuts on his fingers. Were those defensive wounds? He also had one on his wrist. So, you know, we just don't have a lot of the things that we would need to help either rule this out or name someone as the suspect. And then we got the two main suspects, not even in the school, and the other one on the whole other side of the building, right? So I'm very much on the fence. I don't get it. And it's almost like if he were murdered, then who did it? Because it couldn't have been the Bell brothers. Or is the school completely lying about everything and they're covering for them? And so let's get into this some more. Let's do some more digging because I dug and dug and dug. And we're going to go over all of it. So, wrapping this case up, let's get into it. Okay, so we talked about this in the end of part 3. As far as Lee Touchton and Reverend Floyd, it's their job to get to get justice for racial crimes. And they don't see that a racial crime has been committed here. So they have pulled themselves from this whole thing. And, Reverend Floyd fought for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, many, many others. If he saw something, he would still be fighting. There would be no reason for him to back out after every down for the case of time, all the energy and the money that he put into this case. And that's my opinion. Also been judges that recuse themselves from hearing this case, saying, "We have attempted to mediate the presently outstanding issues in the Kendrick Johnson matter, but it appears at this point we have reached an impasse. After much consideration, contemplation, and discussion with other judges in the circuit, I deem it appropriate to recuse in this matter." And this was from Superior Court Judge Harry J. Altman. And after Judge Altman made this statement and recused himself, 6 other judges followed suit. Many of the people named in the lawsuit that was filed were people that these judges knew, they worked with, or they were friends with. And to them, this was a huge conflict of interest. And to be fair, these judges hadn't ruled. If these judges hadn't ruled in the Johnsons' favor, then they would have probably been accused of, being biased, and therefore mistrials, and all sorts of things could have ended up as a result of that if they had heard this case. Benjamin Crump responded to this act by these judges, saying, "This decision cuts to the very heart of this matter, especially for the family. That is, Can they get fair and impartial people to look at what happened to this child and render a fair decision so that they can have peace at night? The city of Valdosta said, based on the sensational nature of the allegations made, the city and the employees named categorically deny allegations of wrongdoing and considers the claim to be meritless. The city looks forward to defending itself in a court of law. And that was said by Larry Hansen. March 1st of 2016, the Johnsons dropped their $100 million lawsuit, and after the case was closed due to insufficient evidence, the DOJ made a statement. They said, lawyers and investigators from the Department of Justice, the U.S. Marshals Service, and the Metropolitan Police Department from the District of Columbia conducted a thorough and comprehensive investigation into the event that surrounded Kendrick's death. The investigation included, among other things, interviewing over 100 people, reviewing tens of thousands of emails and text messages, reviewing surveillance footage from the Lowndes High School, and analyzing other available information regarding the events of January 10th through 11th of 2013. The investigative team also consulted with an independent medical examiner and forensic pathologist who reviewed relevant medical records in both autopsy reports. So they can find no evidence of a conspiracy. At least not that all these entities are in on a cover-up. But they don't, in my opinion, they don't have to all be in on it. Right? The GBI doesn't have to be in on it. Washington, D.C. doesn't have to be in it. The District of Columbia doesn't have to be in it. You know, the judges and what, they don't have to be in on it. In my opinion, if there were a conspiracy to cover up this case, it would have been right at the beginning. You know, it was within the school. That's my opinion, if that were the case. And this is all alleged and all speculation. I just want to remind everyone. But if this was a cover-up, I feel that, well, no, none of all those other entities would be in on it because this was done locally. This was done at the school that day, just like the family believes as well. And, you know, when we talked about surveillance in part 2, the school handed over that surveillance. It wasn't seized. The hard drive was never seized. So anything could have been done to those surveillance videos, and no one would have known because that metadata would have been already off. So whatever could have been done to it after that, you know, we wouldn't have known. So the school could have easily been in on this with the local police, the sheriff's department mainly, and it could have been covered up right then and there. You know, this is alleged again from Rick Bell saying, hey man, do this for my kids, blah, 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 blah. You know, maybe he threatened them. Maybe he paid them. I don't know. But if this is when it would have happened. So I don't feel that it's that crazy to think, because I'm not thinking that the GBI is in on this. I'm not thinking Washington, D.C. is in on this. I'm not thinking all these big time people are in on this. I'm thinking small town covered up. It wouldn't be the first time, would it? So now, where was I? To make matters even worse for the Johnson family, Judge Richard Porter entered an order for the family of Kendrick to pay back nearly $300,000 in attorney's fees and expenses associated with the lawsuit that they filed. The actual total was $292,102 to be exact. And this was to pay lawyers' fees for the Bells, for Steve Owens, for the police, the school district, saying basically that they had zero evidence from the beginning to even file this lawsuit. When Kenneth was asked in court if he had any evidence that Kendrick was murdered, he admitted that he did not. He also admitted that the photo was not of KJ when he was found, and that in fact it was taken days later after the autopsy was performed. So now Lee Touchton said, in addition to the first statement I read you a while ago, she said that I was shouted down by many NAACP officers. And okay, let's backtrack for a second. So in part 3, I read you a statement that she had made. This is in addition to that statement. She said, I immediately resigned. So did most of the local NAACP officers, many of whom are professionals and church leaders. I worked alongside Reverend Floyd Rose for 15 years. I've always been a member of his organization, the Valdosta SCLC, which was previously the People's Tribunal, so the chapter voted me into the lead investigator position on this case. She also said, I think the murder story is not only false, but also ridiculous and based on only wild speculation and wild fabrication. When investigating the allegations, Lee Touchton found them to be so outrageously false that they had to be made with malicious intent. Now here's the list of these allegations and what was found one more time. So we went through the allegations in part 2. Now we're going to go through the allegations, not again, but like in full. So they claim that no one from the school cared or came to Kendrick's funeral. This is false. A coach came, and he actually spoke at the funeral, as well as numerous other teachers attending the funeral, including 2 members of the school board, and they all sat in the front. And there was over a dozen more besides that had attended KJ's funeral. And the school also had a separate memorial service for KJ. 2. Kenneth Johnson claimed that KJ had a fight with one of the Bell brothers, making it seem to have happened right before his death, adding that Rick Bell said for KJ to come over to his house and make it a fair fight and basically re-fight Brian. Lee Touchton found no evidence of this conversation, and the fight was over 1 year before KJ's death, and numerous people testified that Brian and KJ were friends after that fight. 3, Lee Touchton went on to say, the family posted a photograph, and we talked about this, of Kendrick's post-autopsy face on a giant poster in the middle of downtown Valdosta and all over social media, and claimed that he looked this way as a result of a beating. This photo was actually taken at the funeral home post-autopsy, before the face had been reconstructed. In an autopsy, the skin is cut at the back of the head and the facial skin is pulled down away from the face so that the underlying muscle can be examined. The funeral home had not yet had the chance to reconstruct KJ's face, and the family plastered this photograph next to that of Emmett Till and claimed the 2 deaths were analogous. People believe that Kendrick Johnson looked like that when he was found dead. He did not. They still promote this photograph as how he looked when he was found dead. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Emmett Till, I did some research on him, and he was a 14-year-old boy from Chicago who was visiting his aunt and uncle in Mississippi, and he was beaten to death after being falsely accused of flirting with a white woman. This Emmett Till case was completely different circumstances in comparison to Kendrick Johnson's case. This was definitely used as a shock value type thing, and it is very unfair to Emmett Till, in my opinion, and to KJ as well. And let me just say my opinion on what they did with these photos. And for one, they didn't have to use that photo. They could have used the photo that the medical examiner took before the autopsy was performed if they wanted to use one. That one was bad enough. But when you see the photo of this, if you choose to look at it, it is a lot different than the original. But the original looks like he had been beaten up. But again, that was said to have been from the lividity and of being upside down for all of that time. So, but what I want to say about the photographs, if this were my child, that is not a photo I would want circulating and how my child is remembered. There are people that go out and specifically seek out these types of photos for some kind of, like, they want to see this horrifying image. And I would never want anyone to be seeking out what my daughter looked like when she died, especially like that. And, you know, while I understand why they did it, I 100% understand why they did it. I'm not sure why they used the post-autopsy photo, because it is even more disturbing. And, you know, I understand why they did it. I really, truly do. And, but it certainly is not something that I would have done. But at the same time, in order to get their point across, that's what they felt that they needed to do. So I can respect and understand that. So number 4, the family started publicly accusing 2 boys whose father is an FBI agent. These boys have rock solid alibis. This information was given to us immediately after the case was closed, and it was given to the Johnson family as well. They have accused the family on the Georgia NAACP call in public, and now the Johnson family is suing the accused family for being involved in KJ's death, even though the Johnson family has been showed a mountain of evidence that these boys could not have been involved. As of last week, the Johnson family, whose son is on the wrestling team, they've even posted pictures of the boys' 92-year-old grandma and threatened that they are coming to get them. At the latest march and rally, the mother, Jacqueline Johnson, had stated, "We are going to do to them what they did to Kendrick." So Lee Touchton was one of the biggest advocates for them, but no matter what she tried to find out, she found zero evidence. And you have to remember, she lives in that town. And I'm sure that she was getting some heavy flack for saying these things, that she no longer was going along with the family, and she no longer believed that the family was being honest. And she's not alone. Reverend Floyd Rose, also one of the family's biggest advocates, at first changed his tune as well, stating that he believed that KJ's death was an accident. He does understand why people believe that murder was what happened, based on all the history of this town and all of the racism that has been in this town. And you know, this is what I talked about at the very, very beginning in part 1, this foundational mistrust due to the history of Valdosta. Reverend Floyd said either he wasn't murdered or whoever did it was so powerful that they were able to hide him and cover it up and have all these people lie. If this were the 1960s and you asked me that and it was Valdosta, Georgia, I would say, well, maybe. But I just don't believe that. Nobody has convinced me of that. That's all in the mind of black folks. So when all this happened, they had a problem distinguishing the truth and what could be the truth. The emotion is, here we go again. He also said, you won't find a person of any reputation in this town that says that boy was murdered. Other injustices in the area, you bet there are. This is not one of them, and I'm not going to be bossed around by whites or blacks. Period. Well, in my opinion, that kind of says it all. I mean, it's right from his perspective. What he's saying is, yes, Valdosta has always been kind of a town that supported racism, and there have been many racial injustices throughout the town's history. But now the times have changed somewhat. And is it still going on? Yes. But did it go on here in this specific case? No. He did not believe that it did. So, March 14th, 2021, the case is reopened. And it started with an audio taped confession. And on this recording, you can hear a man say, supposedly, I have not heard it, "They are going to catch me anyway. I should have never done this. I was young and stupid. Kendrick didn't deserve this, man. They're going to catch me anyways." So allegedly, the family paid $1,000 for this audio recording, and they turned it over to the Lowndes County Sheriff's Department for authentication. Now, at the time Ashley Pope was who they turned it over to, and she said, I think it's a he actually, "I want to know the truth. I want the other people to know the truth. Until you look at everything that everyone has done, I can't look you in the eye and say I know the truth." So unfortunately, this audio tape was not authenticated, and the person that made it was caught. And Ashley Pope wants to press charges. However, the family did not. And the family believes that this tape is real, even though the police have said it's not. This is the guy who did it. Supposedly, the family believes it was made by a second cousin of the Bell brothers, which they are saying they don't have a second cousin. In the reopening of the case, there were 17 boxes of files. 17 boxes, one box for each year, Kendrick's life. The family believed that the answers would be within those boxes. However, after going through all 17 of those boxes, the case was closed again on January 26th of 2022 with still zero evidence to charge anyone for the death of Kendrick Johnson. November of 2021, a documentary made that was called Finding Kendrick Johnson, which I talked about a couple of times already. I wanted to go over a couple of things that were in this documentary. So in this documentary, they speak with a man by the name of Mitch Creedle, and he has 25 years in as a homicide investigator. It also features a boy by the name of Malik Austin, who is said to be KJ's best friend. There have been some other allegations made in the documentary that I did not know about until I watched it, such as Brian Bell taking a different route to classes after KJ's death. I also was not aware that Brian and Brandon Bell were the only students that were not ever interviewed by law enforcement, and the only students that had lawyered up after Kendrick's death. They also avoided Malik after Kendrick's death as well. And it was also alleged that Rick Bell had met with all actually, of the witnesses prior to them being questioned, and that the students had said that they felt threatened and, even stalked by him. Both Brian and Brandon were interviewed, and the interview with Brian, in my opinion, he looks so guilty. He's looking around, and honestly, he doesn't appear to be the brightest crayon in the box, but he also looks very suspicious. The way he's looking around, the way he looks down and away when he's asked these questions. Brandon, I think, is much more convincing. Let's take a look real quick at a snip of Brian Bell's interview.
I'm going to ask my photographer to push in tight on your face.
Okay.
Our viewers can read your expression. Did you have anything to do with the death of Kendrick Johnson?
No. He was like one of my good friends.
Even at the time of his death?
Even at the time.
So you see what I mean? That looks like the response of someone who is lying. And here's a little clip of Brandon.
The Twitter sphere and so on.
Yes, sir. It should be. And I want everybody to know the truth. And they can ridicule me and they can say whatever they want, but in the end, the truth will prevail. And everybody will find that me and my brother have been innocent and always will be innocent.
Either he's a sociopath or he's really good at lying, which could be a sociopathic trait. Speculation, allegedly, my opinion, all of that. Brandon is much more put together when he's questioned, and his interviews seem a little bit more believable, whereas Brian's just look like he's guilty. And if I didn't know anything about this case, like if I hadn't deep dived in and found out all the facts surrounding this case, and all I did was watch this documentary, my opinion would 110% be that Brian Bell allegedly killed Kendrick and that Brandon is covering for him. It kind of seems like the older brother's covering for the younger brother.
Where were you?
I was in class. First block, second block, third block, and fourth block.
Close to the gym?
No.
Did you see Kendrick that day?
No.
That's what it appears to me.
A year before, I mean,
What was
we're
that
still
about,
friends.
anyway?
So I can't even remember. I mean, it was so small to us, like it was ridiculous.
Your brother had a football scholarship offered to FSU.
Yes, sir, he did.
They pulled it back.
On signing day.
So how low did you get?
To the lowest.
Because I believe Brandon when he says he didn't have anything to do with it, but I do not believe Brian when he says it, based off of these interviews. Again, I wasn't there. That's just what I think. So the documentary also talks about an email that had circulated and went out, and in it the names were changed to Jane and Joe, but really it's Brian and Jane. So we still don't know the female used, but this was a rumor, and this person showed the police this email. And eventually he too recanted his story, just like Dalton Chauncey had. And, so we've heard that before. Anyone who has come forward with any evidence against Brian or Brandon Bell have been scared off, or they came out later and recanted saying that they had lied. So either they're all a bunch of liars, or Rick Bell really went around and spoke to these students and maybe scared them or threatened them into telling a certain narrative to the police to protect his sons. There's an issue with people not being questioned in a timely manner, and this is a fact. A lot of the interviews with students and staff were not done for up to months after KJ's death. And while it can be procedure to wait a week or two to question certain witnesses, a month and beyond is way too long. And this comes from this 25-year homicide detective, veteran. So the slides of KJ's neck from the autopsy proves hemorrhage. And 3 pathologists have seen these slides and all agree that there was blunt force trauma to that carotid artery in the neck, causing a hemorrhage. In regards to the surveillance footage of redacted footage, in regards to the surveillance footage, there's redacted footage that has been found by the filmmaker of Finding Kendrick. This surveillance footage shows KJ and Brian walking actually right next to each other on the day that KJ went missing, and we know what happened after that. And why does this matter? Because Brian has done nothing but state that he did not see Kendrick at all that day. So that just proves that he lied about that. And why would he lie about that? He would have been, yeah, I saw KJ that day. I see him every day between this passing period. But they weren't walking next to each other like as if they were friends. Brian was a little offset of him and a little behind him. And in my opinion, in the still shot here, looks almost like he's kind of side-eyeing KJ. So they lied about that, and that footage was all redacted as you can see, it took a lot to get the exposure of these stills, these videos. And when Mitch Creedle, the investigator of the case, was shown this footage, he said that he had never seen it before. And you can see it in his face. He's wondering what else, like how he didn't see it. Was it because it was redacted? Like he was looking into it. Why didn't he see this? You know, a filmmaker saw this, but he's a detective and he was looking for these types of things and he didn't see it. And he questioned whether or not he missed other things now because of this. And he was just very visibly upset. So I think it might be because, you know, the filmmaker made this film in 2021. So we have a lot more technology to kind of go into old footage. Possibly he was able to run it through programs that they didn't have back then. I don't know, but regardless, he found it, and there is proof that Brian did in fact see KJ that day and was very close to him. So it's interesting. It's interesting too that if they were such good friends, why weren't they walking together if they were literally right next to each other? So that's all I really have on Kendrick Johnson. I'm obviously, we could get into all these pieces, all of these allegations and missing evidence, and you know, we could really pick all of it apart. Where are the organs? Where are the clothes? What is with all these discrepancies? Is it just the media throwing things out, you know, half-cocked, like, or is it really because there's something more to it? I mean, the issue is if one person had said, oh, well, I scrapped the organs because they were no good. Like there would be no reason to put them back in that body. They were just too badly decomposed, you know, or if we had one person that would come up and be like, oh yeah, the clothes, I totally screwed that one up. You know what I mean? But nobody has said anything about anything. And that's just crazy to me. Nobody takes responsibility for these things, then it only leaves speculation. And in a town where there's already, you know, a history of law enforcement being a certain way towards black people, for them to think that that is what's going on here is very understandable, right? And like I said before, these clothes are so important because of DNA. They could have had someone's DNA. They could have had a tear in them. They could have had something that showed something, or they could have had nothing else on them, making it even more impossible to think that anything sinister had happened. So, you know, it could have went either way, but yet we don't have it. Now, real quickly, there was a third autopsy that was performed, and the cause of death again was ruled as non-accidental blunt force trauma to the right neck and upper chest. So we have even more now. And it's almost like every time an autopsy is done, something else is found that makes it seem that this was not an accident. So here are just a couple theories that I have, you know, kind of come up with. What I think could have happened if it were an accident or if it were murder. This whole part is all my opinion and it's all speculation. Here is one theory that I think could have happened if what the parents are alleging is true and KJ was actually murdered. So, in my opinion, that would maybe look like this. So Brian is seeing Taylor. Remember Taylor Eakin? They weren't actually dating, but they were seeing each other. They were talking. They kind of liked each other. There was something going on there. It wasn't a full-on relationship yet. I mean, they did end up dating, so there could have been something before that. So, but while she was kind of seeing Brian, maybe she was also seeing Kendrick, or maybe something happened with Kendrick one night, and somehow Brian found out about it. She probably maybe even told Brian, well, you know, I kind of like Kendrick too, and actually we kissed, or whatever. And that started something between KJ and Brian. Taylor, you know, maybe did something with Kendrick and then realized that she actually liked Brian more. And so Brian ends up convincing Taylor to lure KJ into the gym to fight. And they go over by the mats to fight where it's more secluded, and it went too far and something bad happened. And, you know, he realized that KJ was not alive, and we went back later and rolled him up in that gym mat and left him there. Then he talks to his brother and tells his brother what happened. His brother says, we got to tell Dad, see if Dad can help us with this. They talk to their father, and he helps them cover up the whole thing. You know, he gets a hold of the clothing, the organs, disposes of them. You know, knowing that without this evidence, it would be very hard to prove that anything happened. And then being an FBI agent, he gains access to police records and police files and is able to see the witnesses and able to talk to those witnesses before they have a chance to speak to the police yet, and threatens them, pays them off. Who knows? Again, this is all speculation, all my own little mind just twirling here. So everything needed to place those boys in that vicinity was gone. Any evidence of blood was gone. What about the shoes, though? That's the one thing here. These shoes, I told you, they will haunt me forever when it comes to this case. You know, he was clearly seen in the surveillance footage wearing those white Nikes when he's running into the gym. He's wearing them. But they were off when he was found, and his pants were undone. And how was one shoe, Adidas shoe, found in the mat and the other one not in the mat? And then, you know, we got those Nikes on top of them, okay? So it doesn't really, none of this makes sense. Accident or not accident, the whole scene does not make sense to me. It really appears that things were planted or moved. So theory number 2 would be if it were an accident. So maybe KJ's running late to class. The mats are all up against the back wall, making it difficult for him to figure out which one of his shoes were in which mat. Coming back from break, everything was moved around. So he climbs up on the bleachers, climbs up on the mat, finds the mat that his shoes are in, looks around, you know, for a second, realizes it's going to take forever to move all of these mats out of the way, and figures, I'm just going to dive down in there, grab them real quick, you know, come back up, no problem. He goes in, he gets stuck, and he eventually loses consciousness, and shortly after, he passes away. However, none of this explains the shoes. And how is one shoe underneath of his head and the other one outside of the mat if he could have thrown it out at any point? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. I mean, how are 2 pairs of shoes that he was wearing at the time, all of a sudden they're off and shoved in the mat by his calves? Like, not even by his feet, as if he somehow got them off while he was in there. And the random shoe, I think, is just what it is. I think it's just a random shoe. I almost think, you know, if this were a cover-up, they threw that in here just to, like, create more things for people to talk about, to take their mind off of what was actually going on. So my final thoughts. All right, you ready for that? All right, you guys, here we go. My final thoughts on this is really hard to say, because there is no evidence pointing to the Bell brothers, yet who else could have or would have done this to him? No other suspects have ever been named by anybody. So I feel like either Brian did this or it was an accident. I don't necessarily believe it was both boys. But we can't prove that Brian Bell was anywhere near Kendrick at the time that this happened. Did Rick Bell do this? I mean, what was his alibi for that time? In the interviews, why does Brian look so guilty? This case will always haunt me, because I don't think we're ever going to know what happened. And one thing I do not believe is that the FBI, the GBI, Washington, the state of Florida, where all these pathologists came from, I don't think that they were all involved. Because what would they care about two boys from Georgia? I mean, yes, their father was an FBI agent, but was he that big of a deal? Maybe not to the GBI or the whole FBI, but he may have been a big deal enough in Valdosta, Georgia, that, you know, he was able to get the school and to get local police as well as the sheriff's department and, you know, sway them in some way to help cover for his sons. That's the only place I see a cover-up happening. As I stated before, it had to have been done before it moved out of Valdosta. And, you know, so what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section. This case took so long for me to really deep dive in and find out all the facts and kind of get rid of some of the rumors and just go and find the facts and be able to prove certain things are rumors. You know, it was very difficult to do, but I hope that you guys enjoy this. I hope you got, you know, maybe you have your own closure about this case if it was something that you were wondering about based off of everything that we talked about. Unfortunately, I just don't, I don't know, you guys. I don't know. And, you know, if you want, check out the documentary. It will definitely make you think that it was a murder. But where's the evidence? Where are the placement of the boys? It's I don't know. Either way, I hope you guys have a great week. We are going to move on and into some new things. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you have maybe a little bit of closure and you can make your mind up for yourself whether you think that this was an accident or that it was murder. See you guys later. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave your comments below, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.